It's time for the game between Magnus Carlsen and Hikaru Nakamura. What a game it is! These two giants, they played against each other in round 5 of the Global Chess League in London. And man, this is something you absolutely don't want to miss. So many interesting things happening from beginning till the end. Fascinating tactical motives for both sides. So that's something you definitely want to see. Let's dive straight into the action as Magnus Carlsen opens the game here with the move 1e4. c5, knight f3, and it's the move g6. And well, it's a 20 minutes game without increment, but Magnus already spent about a minute here to think which system to go for. Well, he decided to play the open Sicilian, the move d4, pawn takes d4, knight takes d4, bishop g7, and after c4, knight c6, we do have the so-called Maroczy bind from the accelerated dragon. White goes for the move bishop e3 to support a knight on d4. And now, the most popular way of playing this position as black is to follow up here with the move queen b6, pressurizing the knight on d4. It is 3 times attacked, and also the pawn on b2 is under pressure. So, white got to do something about it. Knight b5 is one of those ideas. Moving the knight away, attacking the queen. And here the queen goes to a5 with check. And you see that also the pawn on b2 is still hanging. So there are quite a number of interesting ways of playing here. But the main continuation is knight from b5 back to c3. And now, interesting development here. As black is violating the general opening rules by playing for the 3rd time in a row with the same piece, queen b4. But the main purpose of this move is not only to attack the pawn on b2, but to disturb white's coordination. As white got to make a decision here how to protect that pawn on b2. Now there are various ways of playing. Magnus decided here to play the move queen to c1. And now you're thinking, well, maybe that looks like somewhat a passive continuation. But, for instance, he didn't want to put the queen on d2 because after the move d6, he used that square to develop the knight from b1. So here the knight comes into play, and here you see that the knight on c3 is no longer pinned. So white is threatening here to jump with the knight to d5. That explains the move bishop to e6. Black continues his development, bishop to e2. And here Hikaru went for a small think and played here the move bishop to d4. Remarkable idea, because usually that dark squared bishop is one of black's main assets. It's a pretty strong piece on that long diagonal, making it hard for white to untangle the queen side. But after bishop takes d4, knight takes d4, the knight does look excellent on that weak square. There's no more dark squared bishop, no more pawn to contest that knight. So there are always tactical ideas with that knight on d4. Well, first, white moves the bishop away to d3. And black puts the rook on c8. White castles, knight f6. And here the move rook to e1. Looks like white has managed to keep everything under control. And black is looking for some counterplay against the weaknesses in white's position, especially against the bishop on d3, but also against the pawn on c4. So therefore knight g4 was played. Ambitious move, so for the moment black postpones the decision to castle or not. So white goes h3 and the knight comes into e5, attacking the bishop. And now things are getting quite interesting as bishop goes back to f1. And here black can in fact take the pawn on c4. But it was not done by Hikaru, and for a good reason. I want to show you this line. You're winning a pawn, but after knight takes c4, bishop takes c4, the knight comes in to d5 to hit the queen. And all of a sudden there are huge problems on the c-file. With that bishop on c4, bishop on c4 cannot capture the knight on d5 as it will hang the rook on c8. And well, all of a sudden there are quite some interesting tactics. For instance, you can go queen c5 after the move b4. Queen gotta go away. You can put a queen on d2 to attack the knight. Very soon there will be rook ac1. And the tactics are working in white's favor. So that is something you should definitely avoid. By the way, if you go knight e6 instead of rook ac1, you better take first on c4 before putting the rook on c1. And then you see the main drawbacks of going on a pawn hunt while you're not fully developed. So instead of taking the pawn on c4, Here, Hikaru decided to castle kingside, but now white played the move a3 to attack the queen and to take away the pressure against that pawn on c4. Queen goes back to b6, and now Magnus jumps in with a knight to d5, hitting the queen, hitting the pawn on e7. So bishop takes d5, pawn takes d5, e takes d5, of course. So here the rook is looking very nice, and white is looking for opportunities to liberate his pieces from the queen side. And then, okay, with a small space advantage, queen side majority, looks like white can count on an edge. But black played here the sharp move e6. Very interesting move. The main point is that if you do take on e6, was not Magnus's choice, you do take back with the f-pawn. And no matter the evaluation, the objective evaluation, you can see that things are getting trickier with a potential target on f2. Therefore, instead of e6, Magnus Carlsen played very interesting, aggressive move, knight to e4, activating the knight. And, well, that knight on d2 was covering the b3 square, but can black win here material with the move knight b3, setting up a fork against queen and rook? No way, there is queen h6, very important idea, so that if you do take the rook in the corner, there is knight f6, and after king h8, it's checkmate on h7. That is white's idea, bringing the knight to its central post, intending to come in to f6. But now, look at this. f5 is played, so obviously black hits the knight on e4 and prevent that knight from coming into f6, as the rook is covering that square. And now anyway, if you move the knight, yeah, then something like knight b3 can be played, and it looks as if black is going to win material. So what did Magnus do now? Fantastic idea. He played here this move c5. The center is a total mess. Everything is hanging. White is hitting the queen on b6. Of course, you do take that pawn, and now the knight comes into g5. The knight is safe again, and by having inserted that pawn move c5, the pawn on d6 is no longer there, which means that the rook is attacking that knight on e5. Razor sharp middle game, and looks like everything is working out pretty well for white. Now, still, if you do play knight b3, it's queen c3, knight takes a1, but after queen takes e5, well, this looks completely hopeless. You can take on e6, you can get a bishop to c4, you can, well, you're even threatening to take the knight. Looks like white is having a massive attack. So instead of knight b3, queen d6 was played to protect that knight on e5. Now queen e3 was played, renewing the threat against that knight. And still, there are so many knight forks. This time, knight c2 is a possibility. Was not played because after queen c3 and, well, let's say take the rook on a1, there is rook takes e5. And, well, that knight is trapped in the corner. White is having a massive attack. Even if you do take on d5, it's rook takes d5. You're attacking the queen, you're about to come back with the rook to d1. And obviously after queen takes d5, there is bishop to c4. So, well, that looks pretty nice for white. In any case, Hikaru decided here to drop back with his knight to f7 to reduce the pressure in the center, offering the exchange of knights, but white captures on e6. Very important pawn. Material is even again. Rook on f8 is under threat, so the rook goes to e8 to pin the knight. But here the bishop comes to c4. And of course this bishop is looking at the black king. So therefore taking the knight on e6 is not very attractive, as white is going to take back with the pawn. Now, if you ever hit a bishop, the bishop can go back to a2. So that's not a problem. The bishop will stay on that diagonal for a long period of time. Knight d8 played. So another time, that knight on e6 comes under threat. And white goes rook a1. Excellent move. So that after knight takes e6, pawn takes e6, that knight on d4 is pinned, not able to eliminate the pawn on e6. Rook e7. And now, typical strategy. White really wants to get rid of that knight on d4. It's basically the only piece which holds the black position together. b4, undermining the outpost. Pawn on c5 is under pressure. Black blocks it with b6. Pawn takes. And, well, the difference is that at some point the b file may be used for a rook, trying to infiltrate via that side to hit the black king. But of course, you can also create some weaknesses on the king side by using your h-pawn, intending to put a pawn on h5. Black played f4 to attack the queen. Queen to e4, king to g7, and now it is indeed rook to b1. Who knows, maybe rook b7 can be played at some point. Various possibilities. For me, a natural move would be, let's say if this would be a blitz game, I would play rook c e8, trying to wrap up the pawn on e6. Well, in this game, Hikaru played knight f5. It's not such a bad move, but after rook ed1, the knight goes back to d4. White goes h5. And look at this now. King goes to f6. I mean, the king is nicely surrounded by its own pieces. So having control over the dark squares, you cannot really attack the king at this point. Rook e1 played. And thanks to that king on f6, of course, black can take the pawn on e6. But that's something which is not appealing to everyone. I mean, you place yourself in a pin. And, well, instead, Hikaru felt like that pawn is not going to run away anyway. He played rook c8. Now rook bd1. So here the knight on d4 is pinned again. And Hikaru said, well, I'm just going to take the pawn on h5. Why not? A pawn is a pawn. Rook d3. Now, of course, white is looking for attacking ideas to bring the rook to the h file, to hit the king from that angle. Rook g8 played. Rook h3. Attacking the pawn. White is about to take it. So therefore, rook to g5. The rook is a fantastic defender, guarding the 5th rank, guarding the king, guarding the pawns. Rook h4, attacking the pawn on f4. And well, obviously, you can protect everything here with rook f5. I think this is a good move. Looks as if everything is under control. I don't see how white is going to make progress here. But look now what happens. Hikaru feels like enough time wasted here. He has waited for a long period of time. He is grabbing the opportunity now to launch counterplay against that pawn on g2 with the move f3. Pawn on g2 is under pressure. Rook f4 played, check. King goes back and the pawn goes to g3, taking away the pressure against the white king. But now look at this, h4. Black's attack is continuing, intending to take on g3. And well, big question is how to deal with that. Should you support that pawn on g3? Should you launch for a counterattack? Well, if you can hit the king, that would be huge news. And I think that something like bishop d3, that is a really, really nice move with the idea to shift the attention to the weakness on h7. And apparently everything is looking quite nice. If you go back with the rook, rook takes h4 is good. And there's no good way, no convenient way for wrapping up that pawn on e6. There's queen b7. And oh man, this looks so dangerous with this exposed king not getting the support from any of his pawns. So probably white is winning in this case. But in the game, rather than playing bishop d3, rook takes pawn was played. Remarkable move, because this was exactly what Hikaru was aiming for. Now, boom, rook takes g3. Rook sacrifice. But obviously that rook can't be taken. There's queen takes g3. The queen comes in. And wherever the king goes, it's checkmate on g2. Therefore, after rook takes g3, king h1 was played. There is rook back to g6, preventing white from capturing on g6. But now look at this, rook to g1. White's intentions are pretty obvious. He wants to remove the rook to gain access to the pawn on h7. Now, for instance, if you do take on g1, king takes, that's exactly what you should avoid as black. But the key defense here, and that is something very difficult to see, but so players like Nakamura, they can absolutely find it, and Hikaru did it here. Rook e7 takes on e6. Fantastic idea, because now white can take this rook on e6, but it's recommended not to do that. If you take with the bishop, then that bishop is no longer helping in defense. Look, there's rook takes g1, king takes g1, and it's a knight check on e2. That knight check would not have been possible had the bishop still been on c4. After the king goes away, you come in with the queen to d1, king h2 only move, and then it's checkmate by force. What an absolutely fantastic resource for black. So that means that after rook takes e6, white cannot take the rook at this point. Rook takes g6 check was played. And now black captures with the rook. Queen to b7 check. And here the king gotta go to an, well, kind of an uncomfortable square. Goes to f6. King is wide open, but what to do? Apparently, if you do take on h7, it is total mess. Apparently, black is still doing relatively okay. But here, Magnus felt like inserting this check is even more clever. Because after king g5, queen takes h7. Man, this looks so dangerous with the check on h5 coming soon. Maybe the rook, maybe the queen. Looks like white is having a deadly initiative. However, both players miss the golden opportunity here, because how to defend the king? Well, usually you bring new defenders, but trading off the enemy's attackers is also usually a good strategy. And with rook h6, black could have won the game. You're taking the queen, you're taking the rook. You cannot move the queen because the rook on h4 will be taking. And if you take on h6, you swap everything, then all of a sudden you have this endgame. With an extra pawn, you can bring your king to the center, and then later you move around with the knight to kick the bishop away, to try to push the pawn. This is technically winning, but instead Hikaru wanted to guard his king with the move knight f5. Understandable move. He's attacking the rook on h4, but after rook h5, well, the king goes to f4, and there's no more a good check. You have to be very careful, in fact. Because after a random move, let's say you attack the knight, then black starts giving checks himself. There is queen d1, and it's a similar checkmate as we have seen before. So that is the main threat here, queen to d1. Therefore, bishop f1 was played. Now the bishop is in defense, it's guarding the first rank. And, well, here, rook g5 was played. Rooks were exchanged now. And queen takes a7 played. But materials even. Both sides have a queen, minor piece and two pawns. Which pawn will be more dangerous? Well, that's not really relevant. It's all about the king's safety. Queen comes into d4, hits the pawn on f2. White defends it. Queen g4, Hikaru down to about 30 seconds. Magnus a bit over a minute. King h2. And there's no convenient way to keep on playing for a win. If you push the pawn, you may even lose that pawn very quickly, as both the bishop and queen are hitting it. So therefore, Hikaru Nakamura decided now to play the move queen h4, king g1, queen g4. And, well, this was a very exciting draw with chances for both sides. This is how we like to see chess being played. An absolutely amazing game. And I would like to hear from you, your thoughts on this fantastic battle between these two superstars. Let me know in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you do like this video. Share it among your friends. You can even make a PayPal donation or give just a like, up to you. But help the channel to grow, guys. That's really appreciated. Thanks for watching. See you soon again.